The antique grandfather clock chimed 3 times as I watched my sister Rebecca storm out of our grandmother's study, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors with vengeful precision. The family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, shot me an apologetic look before gathering his papers. "Miss Clark," he said softly, "your grandmother was very clear about her wishes. The estate belongs to you. My name is Olivia Clark, and at 28 years old, I had just inherited not only my grandmother's substantial fortune, but also her business empire, Clark Industries, a fact that my older sister found absolutely unacceptable. I ran my fingers along the smooth mahogany desk where my grandmother had spent countless hours teaching me everything she knew. If only Rebecca understood that this moment had been years in the making. "She'll contest it," I said, not looking up. "You know that, right?" Mr. Harrison nodded, tucking the will into his briefcase. "Your grandmother knew she would. That's why she made certain arrangements. 5 years ago, when I moved in with my grandmother after graduating college, everyone assumed it was because I had nowhere else to go. Rebecca had called me a failure, pointing out how she was already a successful corporate lawyer while I was living off Grandma's charity. What they didn't know was that every morning at precisely 5 a.m., my grandmother would wake me up for our lessons. The world is full of Rebeccas, she told me that first morning, pouring us both coffee in delicate bone china cups. People who think success is about what you display on the surface. But real power, Olivia, real control, that comes from understanding what's beneath. I spent the next 5 years learning everything about Clark Industries from the ground up. While Rebecca bragged about her corner office and designer wardrobe, I was in the company warehouse at 6 a.m., learning inventory management from workers who've been with the company for decades. "Your sister visits me for Sunday brunch," Grandma would say, a knowing smile on her face. "You live here, learning everything I built. Which do you think matters more?" Now, watching Rebecca's Mercedes peel out of the driveway, I thought about all those early mornings, late nights, and weekends spent in the office. Everyone thought I was just Grandma's live-in caretaker. Even my parents had suggested I get a real job instead of wasting time playing nurse. They never knew about the advanced business courses I took online, or the leadership training programs Grandma enrolled me in. They didn't see me studying financial reports late into the night while Grandma quizzed me on company history and strategy. "Mr. Harrison," I said, turning to face him, "how long do we have before Rebecca makes her move?" He checked his watch. "Knowing your sister, she's probably already on the phone with her firm's probate department. I give it 48 hours before they file the initial challenge." I nodded, moving to the ancient filing cabinet in the corner. This was where Grandma kept her most important documents, the ones that weren't digitized or stored in the company's servers. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Contingencies. "She taught you about this too, didn't she?" Mr. Harrison asked, watching me with growing understanding. "Grandma taught me everything," I replied, opening the folder, including exactly what to do when Rebecca tried to take what isn't hers. Inside were detailed records of every mistake Rebecca had made while working as outside counsel for Clark Industries. Every questionable billing practice, every conflict of interest she'd forgotten to disclose, every time she used company information for personal gain. "Your sister thinks she's the smart one," Grandma had told me once. "But she's careless. She leaves traces. Remember that, Olivia. In business and in life, it's not the obvious threats you need to worry about. It's the quiet ones who are really watching." My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Hope you enjoyed your little victory. When my lawyers are done, you'll be lucky if Grandma's china set is still yours." I smiled, thinking of the lessons Grandma had drilled into me. "Never react emotionally to a threat," she'd say. "Emotion clouds judgment. Strategy requires clarity." I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I called Maria Santos, Grandma's longtime assistant and my secret mentor for the past 5 years. "It's time," I said when she answered. "Rebecca's making her move." "Everything's ready," Maria replied, and I could hear her smile. "Your grandmother left very detailed instructions. Shall we begin?" For the next several hours, Maria and I executed the plan Grandma had prepared. First, we contacted the board members, not the official board that Rebecca knew about, but the advisory board Grandma had quietly assembled over the past 5 years. People who had worked with me, mentored me, and knew exactly what I was capable of. Then we reached out to key clients and partners, using relationships I'd built during my wasted years working in different departments. While Rebecca had been climbing the corporate ladder at her law firm, I'd been learning every aspect of our family business. By midnight, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from Rebecca's allies in the company, all suddenly very concerned about their positions. They'd backed her because they thought she was the obvious heir, a successful lawyer, the polished businesswoman. Now they were learning that Grandma had been grooming a different kind of leader. I sat in Grandma's study, now my study, looking at her photograph on the desk. She was young in the picture, standing in front of the first Clark Industries warehouse. A woman building an empire in a time when women weren't supposed to run companies. Your sister thinks power comes from titles and corner offices, she told me during one of our last conversations. But real power comes from understanding every gear in the machine, from knowing the people who make it run. I taught you everything I know, Olivia. The question is, are you ready to use it? The grandfather clock struck midnight, and I stood up, straightening my simple black blazer. Rebecca would arrive at her office tomorrow to find that several key clients had already called to express their confidence in my leadership. The board would convene an emergency session to ratify my position, and her attempts to challenge the will would run into a wall of documentation showing exactly why Grandma had chosen me. But first, I had one more lesson to remember. I opened Grandma's safe, using the combination she taught me years ago, and pulled out an envelope marked for Olivia, when Rebecca shows her true colors. Inside was a letter, written in my grandmother's elegant hand. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then Rebecca has reacted exactly as I knew she would. Power reveals people, darling. It shows us who they truly are. Your sister sees the world as a game to be won. You see it as a legacy to be preserved. That's why you're reading this letter in my study, and she's probably sitting in her office right now, plotting her next move. But remember, this isn't about beating Rebecca. It's about being worthy of what I've built. I chose you not because you're smarter or better, but because you understand what Clark Industries really is, a family of people working together to build something meaningful. Don't let anger or resentment guide you. Lead with the wisdom I know you possess. And remember, sometimes the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemies, but in showing them a better way. All my love, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, placing it in my desk drawer. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but I was ready. Grandma had made sure of that. My phone buzzed again. Another angry text from Rebecca. I smiled, thinking of all the lessons, all the early mornings, all the quiet preparation that had led to this moment. Rebecca thought she was at war with her little sister. She had no idea she was facing someone who'd spent 5 years learning to be a general. The morning after the will reading dawned bright and cold. I arrived at Clark Industries headquarters at 5 a.m., a habit I couldn't break even now. The security guard, Tom, greeted me with a knowing smile. He'd seen me arrive at this hour hundreds of times over the past 5 years, though until yesterday everyone thought I was just the boss's granddaughter who helps out. My first stop was the executive floor, not to my grandmother's old office, but to the small conference room where the real work happened. Maria was already there, surrounded by documents and her ever-present laptop. Rebecca's lawyers filed the challenge an hour ago, she said without looking up. They're claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. I poured myself coffee in my grandmother's old mug, right on schedule. Have they realized yet? Maria's smile was sharp. That your grandmother had quarterly psychological evaluations for the past 5 years? Or that every major decision about your training was documented and witnessed by independent parties? The filing just landed on Mr. Harrison's desk. He's probably enjoying his morning coffee while reading it. At 9 a.m. sharp, my phone rang. Rebecca. You think you're so clever, she hissed when I answered, but I just spoke to the board. They're calling an emergency session to review Grandma's decision. You really think they'll support some inexperienced little girl over me? I let her rant, remembering Grandma's lessons about patience. The meeting's at 2 p.m., I said when she finally paused for breath. I'll see you there. What Rebecca didn't know was that I'd spent the past 5 years getting to know every board member, not through fancy dinners or social events, but through actual work. Mr. Chen from operations had taught me supply chain management. Mrs. Rodriguez had mentored me in finance. They'd watched me learn, grow, and prove myself while Rebecca was busy climbing the corporate ladder elsewhere. At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the boardroom. Rebecca was already there, wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile. She'd arranged her allies on one side of the table, leaving me to face what she thought was a united opposition. Before we begin, Rebecca announced, standing up, I think we need to discuss the stability of Clark Industries under its current situation. My legal team has prepared a detailed analysis of why my grandmother's decision needs to be reviewed. I waited until she finished her practice speech about experience, qualifications, and her deep concern for the company's future. Then I nodded to Maria, who started distributing folders to each board member. What's this? Rebecca demanded, flipping through the contents. A 5-year strategic plan for Clark Industries, I replied calmly, one that I developed with input from each department head, based on my direct experience working in every division of the company. The board members were reading now, their expressions changing as they recognized projects they discussed with me, improvements they'd suggested, innovations they dreamed of. Furthermore, I continued, you'll find audited financials for the divisions I've been quietly managing for the past 3 years. Average growth of 27% year-over-year, employee satisfaction up 40%, and client retention at an all-time high. Rebecca's face had lost its confidence. That's impossible. You were just Grandma's caretaker. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Actually, Ms. Clark, your sister has been effectively running our Asia-Pacific operations since 2021. That expansion plan you praised last quarter. That was her work. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. And the new financial modeling system the company adopted last year, Olivia developed that after spending 6 months analyzing our inefficiencies. One by one, board members began sharing stories of projects I'd worked on, problems I'd solved, innovations I'd implemented. All while Rebecca thought I was just playing nurse to her grandmother. This is ridiculous, Rebecca snapped, but her voice had lost its edge. I'm a qualified corporate lawyer. I have actual business experience. Yes, I said softly, you're a lawyer. But I'm a leader. Grandma knew the difference. I pulled out one final document, the letter Grandma had left for this exact moment. Dear board members, I read aloud, if you're hearing this, then you're deciding between my 2 granddaughters. One has spent her career climbing ladders. The other has spent 5 years learning to build them. Choose wisely. The future of Clark Industries depends on someone who understands that a company is not a trophy to be won, but a legacy to be nurtured. The vote was unanimous. As Rebecca stormed out of the boardroom for the second time in 2 days, I thought about calling after her. Part of me wanted to explain, to help her understand what Grandma had tried to teach us both. But then I remembered one of Grandma's final lessons. Sometimes, Olivia, the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them learn from their mistakes. Rebecca will either grow from this or she won't. That's her choice to make. In the weeks that followed, Clark Industries thrived under the plans I'd spent years developing. Rebecca eventually dropped her legal challenge when she realized how thoroughly Grandma had documented everything. 1 month after the board meeting, I received a package from my grandmother's lawyer. Inside was a small key and a note. For when you're ready to teach the next generation what I taught you. Love, Grandma. The key opened a hidden compartment in her desk, revealing decades of journals documenting her journey building Clark Industries. As I sat reading them in the quiet of my office, I understood her final lesson. True legacy isn't about inheritance or control. It's about wisdom passed down, lessons learned, and the understanding that real success comes not from defeating others, but from building something worthy of being passed on. Rebecca never did understand that. But as I watched the sun rise over Clark Industries each morning, arriving at 5 a.m. just like Grandma taught me, I know I'll be ready when the next generation comes seeking wisdom of their own. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in proving your teachers right.